Welcome, chosen ones. There are seasons when your life stops making sense to people who only understand visible power. They imagine being chosen means ease applause, clean victories, and a smooth road lined with favor. But what they do not see is the deeper contradiction. A marked life often looks surrounded, pressured, misunderstood, and still somehow preserved. You can be wounded and watched over at the same time. You can be envied, misread, and still carried by a hand nobody else can fully explain. That is why your story has unsettled so many people. They thought repeated pressure would erase you. They assumed betrayal would finish what hardship began. They expected the weight on your life to crush your clarity, dim your fire, and make you disappear into the background like someone who was never meant to rise. But again and again, something interfered. The hit came close, yet it did not fully land. The setup formed, yet it broke apart before completion. The people who tried to define your ending kept finding themselves staring at an unfinished sentence. Not because you were flawless, not because you always felt strong, but because there was a boundary around your life that did not come from human approval. While you were trying to survive, something greater was preserving your place. And now the same people who mishandled you are forced to sit with a truth they never planned for. You were never as exposed as you looked, and your fall was never theirs to finalize. Knight of Cups reversed enters this moment like a chalice turned upside down, revealing what spills when emotion is not governed by truth. Around you were offers that looked sincere, faces that seemed soft promises, dressed in tenderness, yet much of it carried confusion, projection, and unstable intention. Chosen one, that is why your spirit kept being pulled away from false comfort and redirected toward deeper discernment. What hurt you was not only malice. Some of it was inconsistency, fantasy, and people loving the idea of you while resisting the reality of what you carried. But even that distortion became part of your protection. The overflow they could not hold was never meant to define your worth. It was exposing theirs. Knight of Swords charges straight through the illusion of unfinished sentences, because once false offers collapse, clarity arrives with speed that startles everyone who underestimated you. The same story they thought was ending quietly suddenly moves with sharp direction, cutting through confusion like wind through clouds. Chosen one, there comes a moment when hesitation is no longer holy. There comes a moment when silence is no longer protection, but preparation completed. And when that moment arrives, movement becomes inevitable. They regret now because they assumed your softness meant surrender. They mistook patience for weakness, reflection for indecision, restraint for incapacity. But what they failed to understand is that disciplined spirits do not react quickly because they see further than surface drama. While others rushed to judge you, you were studying patterns. While they rushed to replace you, you were replacing illusions. While they rushed to speak against you, you were learning how silence reveals motives faster than confrontation ever could. And that is where the story turns. The speed of your transformation is what unsettles them most, because they were comfortable when your power appeared dormant. They were confident when your voice sounded tired. They relaxed when your presence became quiet. But purpose does not disappear when it goes underground. It gathers precision. There is something about focused truth that moves like a blade through fog. No shouting, no spectacle. Just clean direction. Suddenly, decisions become easier. Boundaries become firmer. Discernment becomes faster. And those who relied on your confusion begin to lose their advantage. Their strategies depended on you doubting your perception. Their comfort depended on your willingness to tolerate distortion. Their influence depended on your exhaustion, but clarity removes permission. The air changes when you stop negotiating with what dishonors your spirit. The atmosphere shifts when you stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. something sharp awakens inside you. Not cruel, not reckless, but precise. A quiet refusal to keep entertaining cycles that drain your calling. Yet even that was not the end of it, because decisive energy does not only confront opposition outside you, it cuts through hesitation within you. The old versions of yourself that accepted half-truths begin to dissolve. The habits that once kept peace at your own expense begin to lose authority. The part of you that once needed approval begins to loosen its grip. And what makes it heavier is this: once clarity arrives, reversal becomes visible. People who dismissed you now watch you move without seeking permission. People who doubted you now hear conviction in your silence. People who assumed you would chase validation now watch you walk with internal confirmation. They sense something has shifted, but they cannot fully name it, because beneath that wound was another revelation. Your growth did not come from proving them wrong. It came from no longer needing them to understand. The sword is not aggression. It is alignment. You are no longer negotiating with distractions that once delayed your momentum. Conversations feel different. Decisions feel cleaner. The noise that once clouded your judgment now sounds obvious. And suddenly those who fed on confusion find themselves unable to reach you the same way. That is why regret deepens. Not because you attacked anyone, but because they can feel the distance created by your clarity. You are no longer available for distortion, and the momentum you carry now does not ask for applause. It moves forward, because forward is the only direction left. 9 of Pentacles rises naturally from that sharpened clarity, because once confusion falls away, the quiet architecture of your independence becomes visible. The same blade that cut through illusion also cleared space for self-sufficiency to breathe. Chosen one, what they are witnessing now is not luck. It is cultivation. It is the slow accumulation of inner wealth that could not be stolen because it was never stored where hands could reach. You learned how to build where noise could not interrupt you. While others were performing urgency, you were tending foundations. While they were distracted by appearances, you were strengthening substance. And that difference is what created separation. Because real stability does not announce itself loudly. It reveals itself when pressure arrives and nothing collapses. And that is why their regret deepens in silence. They expected your worth to depend on their recognition. They assumed your confidence required their approval. They believed removing themselves from your life would remove your momentum. But independence forged in solitude answers to no external permission. The discipline you developed when no one was applauding became the very structure now holding your peace intact. There is a quiet luxury in becoming whole without witnesses. Not material excess, but internal order. Not performance, but alignment. The kind of stability that cannot be manipulated because it is not negotiating for validation. The kind of grounded presence that unnerves those who relied on your uncertainty to maintain influence. Still, that was only the surface, because independence is not isolation, it is sovereignty. You did not withdraw to become cold. You withdrew to become clear. Every moment you chose growth over reaction. You were investing in a life that could sustain itself without constant explanation. Every boundary you learned to hold became a gate protecting your energy from unnecessary depletion. Every lesson you accepted became currency that compounds over time. The garden did not grow overnight. It grew through seasons when progress felt invisible, through mornings when motivation felt distant, through nights when doubt whispered that effort might be wasted. Yet you continued cultivating consistency even when immediate results were not visible. And that patience created something many people cannot imitate: earned peace. Peace that does not need to prove itself. Peace that does not panic when misunderstood. Peace that does not beg to be included where respect is absent. Because beneath that wound was another revelation. Your value was never tied to who stayed. It was tied to what you continued building after they left. They are not only witnessing your progress, they are witnessing your self-trust. And self-trust radiates a frequency that cannot be borrowed. The irony is that many people only recognize stability after they lose access to it. They remember the calm you carried only after chaos returns. They remember the wisdom you offered only after confusion reappears. They remember the grounded energy you maintained only after instability replaces it. You did not suddenly become valuable. You simply stopped discounting yourself for the comfort of others. The harvest you now carry did not appear by accident. It grew from choices nobody applauded at the time. It grew from perseverance nobody celebrated while it was happening. It grew from discipline nobody noticed until results became undeniable. And now the evidence stands quietly around you, not as decoration, as confirmation. Your life is no longer negotiating its worth. It is embodying it. The tower does not whisper when false stability has reached its expiration, and the quiet independence you built became the lightning rod that exposed structures never meant to stand forever. What collapses now is not your foundation, chosen one, but the illusions that once surrounded you. The same people who felt secure while misunderstanding you suddenly find themselves standing on ground that no longer feels solid. Because when truth arrives, it does not negotiate with what was built on distortion. And that is why their regret grows louder inside their silence. They believed they understood the story while they were inside it. They assumed they had control over outcomes because they mistook temporary influence for permanent authority. They thought the versions of reality they created would hold shape indefinitely. But there is a moment in every spiritual journey when misalignment can no longer sustain itself. And when that moment comes, collapse is not cruelty. Collapse is correction. Lightning rarely strikes what is already humble. It strikes what refuses to examine its own instability. You were never the chaos they accused you of being. You were the disruption that revealed chaos already present. Your presence did not destroy anything healthy. It exposed what was already cracking beneath polished surfaces. And once exposed, those fractures could no longer hide behind appearances. Still, that was only the surface, because sudden endings often reveal long-hidden truths. Relationships that seemed permanent begin to dissolve without explanation. Roles that once defined identity begin to lose their authority. Beliefs that once felt unquestionable begin to unravel, thread by thread. It can feel disorienting when familiar structures fall away, even when those structures were never designed for your growth. Yet even that was not the end of it, because collapse clears vision. When false towers fall, the sky becomes visible again. And what makes this moment sacred rather than tragic is that what falls away was never meant to contain you. It was meant to reveal you. Every broken illusion creates more space for reality to breathe. Every sudden shift removes another layer of limitation that once disguised itself as security. The flames that appear destructive are often purification in motion. The noise that sounds frightening is often transformation accelerating. Because beneath that wound was another revelation. You were never losing stability. You were losing confinement. Those who built identities around controlling perception struggle the most when truth becomes undeniable. They cannot easily reconstruct narratives once evidence contradicts their assumptions. They cannot easily maintain superiority when outcomes refuse to support their conclusions. So regret enters quietly, not because they suddenly understand everything, but because something inside them recognizes that what they dismissed was never as fragile as they believed, and now the same structures they trusted feel uncertain. The irony is that what falls apart now was already weakening long before visible collapse. The pressure did not create the fracture. It revealed it. You did not bring destruction. You carried illumination, and illumination always reorganizes what can no longer pretend. The storm does not apologize for clearing the air. It simply moves through, and what remains standing afterward is finally real. 8 of Cups reversed lingers at the edge of the ruins, because after the false towers fall, the next battle is not outside you, but inside the part that still feels tempted to look back. When collapse clears the sky, old attachments can suddenly seem softer than they were. Familiar pain starts dressing itself up as unfinished business. Chosen one, this is where many people lose momentum, not in the storm, but in the moment after, when the heart wonders whether it should return to what already proved it could not hold truth. And that is why your presence became such a mirror to them. You were not merely exposing their actions. You were exposing the pattern beneath them, the endless circling, the refusal to leave empty wells, the habit of calling emotional confusion loyalty, the instinct to stay near what drains them, because at least it is familiar. Some people do not hate light, because it is cruel. They resist it because it asks them to leave behind identities they have learned to survive through. And what makes this heavier is this: you reflected the road they kept refusing to take. You kept growing. You kept questioning old stories. You kept walking away from spaces that fed on your energy while offering no nourishment in return. That kind of movement unsettles those who have built entire lives around spiritual avoidance. They can tolerate your pain if it keeps you relatable to their stagnation. They can tolerate your wounds if your wounds keep you circling the same mountain with them. But once you begin leaving, once you stop romanticizing what repeatedly empties you, your life becomes a living challenge to the excuses they have wrapped around themselves. Still, that was only the surface, because looking back is not always about love. Sometimes it is grief. Sometimes it is habit. Sometimes it is the ache of realizing how much time was spent trying to draw water from dry ground. You felt that ache. You felt the pull to revisit conversations that had already revealed their limit. You felt the temptation to give one more chance, one more explanation, one more rescue attempt. Not because you were weak, but because your heart was sincere. And sincere hearts often suffer longer because they keep hoping reality will become as honest as their intention. Yet even that was not the end of it, because discernment matures when hope stops arguing with evidence. There comes a sacred exhaustion, a moment when your spirit no longer wants recycled closure, a moment when your soul would rather face loneliness than keep pretending an empty cup still carries water. And once that threshold is crossed, something in you changes permanently. Because beneath that wound was another revelation. Their regret is tied to the fact that you finally stopped standing at the doorway. You are no longer halfway gone. You are gone in the places that mattered. Not bitter, not loud, not vindictive, just released. And release is terrifying to people who thought your compassion would keep you endlessly accessible. They could handle your tears. They could handle your patience. They could even handle your silence. What they did not know how to handle was your detachment from the cycle itself. Now your life says what your mouth no longer needs to repeat. You will not keep returning to what refused to become whole. 10 of Pentacles reversed emerges after release, settles into your bones, because once you stop returning to empty wells, the deeper realization begins to surface. Some people were never prepared to build anything lasting with truth. The structures they promised stability through were often dependent on denial performance and inherited patterns that no one ever questioned. Chosen one, your departure did not only remove your presence, it removed the illusion that their foundation was as strong as they believed. And that is where their regret becomes generational. because what you represented was not temporary comfort. You represented interruption of cycles that had quietly repeated for years. Patterns of avoidance passed down as normal, silence passed down as peace, dysfunction passed down as loyalty. Many people inherit emotional blueprints they never examine. They simply repeat what feels familiar, even when familiar is quietly harmful. You were not meant to repeat those scripts. You were meant to question them, and that made your presence both invitation and threat. Still, that was only the surface, because breaking cycles rarely feels heroic while it is happening. It feels lonely. It feels misunderstood. It feels like standing in a room where everyone else agrees to pretend something unhealthy is acceptable, and you are the only one who cannot unsee it anymore. You did not wake up one day wanting distance. Distance became necessary when truth could no longer breathe in spaces committed to avoidance. And what makes this heavier is this: many people prefer predictable discomfort over unfamiliar growth. Even when they pray for change, they often resist the form change arrives in. Because transformation asks for honesty. Transformation asks for accountability. Transformation asks for responsibility that comfort never required. Yet even that was not the end of it, because cycles break quietly before they break visibly. The moment you decided your peace was worth protecting, something ancient lost authority over your future. Expectations you never agreed to began loosening their grip. Roles that once confined your expression began dissolving. Obligations rooted in guilt rather than love began losing influence. Because beneath that wound was another revelation. Not every connection is meant to survive your evolution. Some bonds were built around shared limitation. Some agreements were built around mutual avoidance. Some identities were built around never changing. When you changed, the agreement changed. And many people do not know how to renegotiate relationships when growth enters the conversation. They only know how to repeat what once felt safe. So they call your transformation distance. They call your boundaries pride. They call your clarity rebellion. But the truth is simpler. You stopped inheriting what was never meant to define you. You stopped agreeing with stories that required your silence. You stopped protecting systems that required your diminishment. Now the regret deepens because your absence reveals what was quietly depending on your compliance. Stability built on denial cannot hold shape once awareness enters the structure. You did not destroy legacy. You interrupted limitation disguised as legacy. And the space you created by stepping away is now showing everyone what was never as solid as it appeared. Because real inheritance is not repetition. Real inheritance is restoration. Milky Way stretches beyond the broken inheritance, because once cycles release their grip, your awareness begins expanding beyond the small rooms where your identity was once negotiated. What once felt like a personal struggle now reveals itself as part of a much larger unfolding. Chosen one, the moment you stopped shrinking yourself to fit inherited expectations, your vision widened. You began seeing patterns not only in people but in timing, alignment, synchronicity, and the strange precision through which your life kept redirecting you. And suddenly the story became bigger than who misunderstood you. Because when perspective widens, regret changes form. Those who misjudged you were reacting to a version of you still emerging. They evaluated you based on chapters still being written. They tried to define you within the limits of their imagination, unaware that your life was being shaped by something not confined to their understanding. Still, that was only the surface. Because expansion often begins quietly. It begins with subtle realizations that you are no longer drawn to what once consumed your attention. Conversations that once felt urgent now feel temporary. Conflicts that once drained your energy now feel small against the scale of what you are becoming. The need to convince others of your worth begins dissolving as your sense of direction strengthens. When consciousness widens, urgency reorganizes itself. And what makes this shift sacred is that your focus moves from reaction to creation. You begin investing in what multiplies rather than what merely maintains. You begin nurturing environments that support growth, rather than environments that simply tolerate survival. You begin choosing alignment over approval. Yet even that was not the end of it, because expansion can feel isolating before it feels empowering. When your inner world grows larger, fewer people can immediately understand the landscape you are navigating. They may interpret your distance as detachment. They may interpret your calm as indifference. They may interpret your focus as secrecy. But in truth, you are learning to listen to something deeper than noise, because beneath that wound was another revelation. Your path was never meant to remain small enough for everyone to understand simultaneously. Some journeys require distance from familiar reference points so that new direction can become visible. Some transformations require solitude so that internal guidance becomes audible. Some assignments require patience so that timing unfolds without interference from premature explanation. Those who rushed to define you early now face the discomfort of watching a narrative outgrow their assumptions. They must reconcile the version they believed with the reality now unfolding. And often reconciliation arrives as regret, not always spoken, often simply felt. Because the wider your horizon becomes, the clearer it becomes that misunderstanding was never your limitation. It was their boundary. And boundaries reveal themselves most clearly when someone walks beyond them. Your life is no longer orbiting old definitions. It is navigating by a larger sky. Two of Cups reversed appears when the wider sky reveals something both liberating and uncomfortable. Not every connection that once felt destined was designed to remain aligned with who you are becoming. As your horizon expanded beyond old definitions, the imbalance in certain bonds became impossible to ignore. Chosen one, what once felt mutual, began to show subtle fractures. Energy that should have flowed freely started requiring negotiation. Understanding that should have come naturally began demanding explanation. And that is where the quiet heartbreak lives. Because disconnection rarely begins with loud endings. It begins with small misalignments that slowly accumulate weight. Conversations start feeling strained. Support becomes conditional. Presence becomes inconsistent. You begin sensing that the bridge is no longer being maintained from both sides. Still, that was only the surface, because imbalance often hides beneath politeness. People can say the right words while withholding the right actions. They can promise loyalty while secretly competing. They can claim care while quietly resenting the growth they cannot control. And for a long time, empathy can convince you to keep trying, keep explaining, keep extending understanding far beyond what reciprocity ever offered. But clarity changes tolerance. Once awareness sharpens, you begin noticing where effort flows in only one direction. You begin noticing where emotional responsibility becomes uneven. You begin noticing where connection depends on your willingness to minimize yourself for the comfort of others. And what makes this realization painful is not anger. It is recognition. Recognition that some bonds were sustained more by hope than harmony. Recognition that certain people loved your accessibility more than your authenticity. Recognition that some relationships thrived only when your boundaries remained negotiable. Yet even that was not the end of it, because imbalance cannot survive where self-respect becomes stable. The moment you stopped overextending yourself to maintain peace, the dynamic revealed its truth. Without your constant adjustment, tension surfaced. Without your willingness to compensate, gaps became visible. Without your silence, contradictions became undeniable. because beneath that wound was another revelation. True connection does not require you to disappear in order to be accepted. It does not require self-betrayal to maintain closeness. It does not punish growth. It celebrates it. Those who could not celebrate your evolution began feeling the distance they helped create. Not because you rejected them, but because authenticity cannot continuously perform compatibility where alignment no longer exists. And that is where regret begins to speak quietly inside people who once believed access to you would always remain guaranteed. You did not become difficult. You became honest. You did not become distant. You became discerning. And discernment often feels like loss to those who depended on your limitless accommodation. But what left your life was not love. What left was imbalance. And balance does not return to spaces that refuse to recognize its value. 6 of Cups opens gently after the imbalance is acknowledged, because once truth separates what was forced from what was real, memory begins to soften its grip on your identity. Chosen one, not every connection was false. Not every moment was manipulation. Some chapters carried sincerity, innocence, and genuine warmth. And honoring that truth does not require returning to environments that no longer support who you are becoming. Nostalgia can be both comfort and trap. It can remind you of who you were before survival became necessary. It can remind you of simpler season when trust flowed without calculation. It can remind you that your heart was never hardened by default. Your softness was not weakness. It was evidence of how deeply you were willing to believe in goodness. Still, that was only the surface, because memory often edits complexity. It highlights laughter but forgets tension. It remembers connection but minimizes imbalance. It recalls closeness but overlooks the quiet ways your needs were left unmet. When the present becomes clearer, the past sometimes attempts to rewrite itself in gentler tones. Not because the past was entirely false, but because longing prefers familiarity over uncertainty. The heart sometimes wants reassurance that what once felt meaningful did not dissolve without purpose. Yet even that was not the end of it. Because maturity learns how to hold memory without surrendering direction. You are allowed to appreciate what once existed without re-entering spaces that no longer align with your evolution. Gratitude does not require regression. Compassion does not require self-abandonment. Reflection does not require repetition, because beneath that wound was another revelation. Some people were part of your awakening, not your destination. They helped shape awareness that now protects your peace. They helped reveal boundaries that now guard your growth. They helped teach discernment that now guides your decisions. Even the moments that hurt contributed to the clarity you now carry. The past becomes wisdom when it stops becoming instruction. And what makes this realization liberating is that you no longer need to rewrite history in order to move forward. You do not need to label everything as betrayal in order to justify change. You do not need to deny the good in order to protect the present. Some memories remain gentle. Some lessons remain sacred. Some connections remain appreciated from a distance. But distance does not mean loss of meaning. It means meaning has completed its role. The version of you who needed those experiences exists inside the person you have become. And honoring that version does not require returning to the same emotional geography. You are allowed to carry gratitude without carrying attachment. You are allowed to remember without re-entering. You are allowed to love what helped shape you without reopening doors that lead backwards. Because growth does not erase the past, it reframes it. And in that reframing, peace becomes possible. Justice reversed arrives where memory has finally settled, because once you stop romanticizing the past, you can see with painful clarity how often imbalance tried to wear the costume of fairness. Chosen one, this is the final revelation many people resist until life forces them to face it. Not every wrong is corrected immediately. Not every lie collapses on schedule. And not every person who wounded you will suddenly confess with clean hands and open eyes. Sometimes the scales tilt for longer than they should. Sometimes truth moves through delay. Sometimes the courtroom is silent while your spirit is still carrying evidence. And that silence can test you. It can make you wonder whether integrity matters when deception appears to prosper. It can make you question whether restraint was wisdom or simply another name for loss. It can tempt you to think justice must be loud, immediate, and visible in order to be real. But deeper order does not panic when timing looks uneven. What is crooked always contains the seed of its own exposure. What is false always leans under the weight of maintaining itself. And what was done in distortion eventually collides with consequence, even if that collision takes longer than wounded hearts prefer. Still, that was only the surface, because the greatest correction was never going to be your revenge. It was going to be your restoration. That is what people failed to understand. They thought harm was measured only by what could be seen in the moment. They thought if your tears were private, then the damage was manageable. They thought if your silence remained dignified, then the story could be rewritten in their favor. But your life has become the record they cannot edit. Your peace has become testimony. Your steadiness has become witness. Your survival has become a sentence spoken without shouting. And that is why regret reaches them differently. Now, not as a dramatic scene, as a slow, inescapable recognition. They see you standing where they expected ruins. They see clarity where they expected confusion. They see dignity where they expected bitterness. And what makes it unbearable is that your rise does not require their collapse to prove itself. Your healing is not built from spite. Your authority is not fueled by obsession. You are not standing because you finally learned how to hate better. You are standing because truth once rooted deeply enough becomes difficult to uproot. Because beneath every delay was another revelation. Your suffering had an ending even when you could not yet see the line. The pressure was not permanent. The distortion was not final. The verdict over your life was never in the hands of those who mishandled you. So let this settle into your bones. What was off balance is being exposed. What was hidden is losing cover. What was delayed is moving. And what survived in you through all of it is now undeniable. You were never forgotten in the silence. You were being preserved through it. And preserved things move differently once they understand. They were never abandoned, only carried through a season that could not keep them forever. So breathe. Hear, chosen one. Let the noise fall behind you. Let the scales, the delays, the unanswered questions, and the faces that misunderstood you lose their grip on your nervous system. You do not need to chase a verdict that your life is already revealing. Some people will regret how they handled you. Some never will say it out loud. Some will sit in silence watching what they tried to define without ever being able to explain how you kept rising. But your healing cannot stay tied to their realization. Your peace is holier than that. You were not preserved so you could spend the rest of your days looking backward. You were preserved so you could walk forward with cleaner sight, steadier hands, and a heart that no longer confuses delay with denial. What belongs to you will not require you to shrink. What is aligned with you will not feed on your confusion. What is meant for your next season will meet the version of you that has learned how to honor truth without apology. So keep going quietly if you must. Keep building. Keep healing. Keep choosing what is clear over what is familiar. And when old voices try to call you back into expired sorrow, remember this. You have already survived the part that was supposed to break you. Let that be enough proof. Let that be enough closure. Let that be enough fire for the road ahead.